It has happened once again and again in Texas. Another woman seemingly losing her life because Texas decided that reproductive rights are not a thing that you need. And so you can add yet another needless death to the list of women that Texas has killed with their legal changes over the past couple of years. In this case, we were talking about Porsha Ngumezi. And as we'll explain, the death was tragic. It was preventable, and there's a lot of overlap in these stories that you'll see. The experience that these individuals are having, there's some through lines. And again, every one of these is perhaps an opportunity for us to learn, to reverse course, and yet we didn't do that for the past four. I have very little hope that we probably will coming out of this one. But in any event, 3 of those deaths were in Texas, and we want to tell you about Porsha. So she was a mother of 2 young sons that she shared with her husband, Hope. She was approximately 11 weeks pregnant in the spring of last year when she began experiencing bleeding consistent with miscarriage. She drove herself to the emergency room at Houston Methodist Sugarland, where Hope later joined her after finding childcare. And so you can see in a photo here, Porsha and Hope. At the hospital, an ultrasound all but confirmed she was in the middle of a miscarriage, which carried greater risk due to a blood clotting disorder she suffered from. This was not unforeseen. She was aware of this. The doctors are familiar with it. Over the next 6 hours, she passed out and needed 2 blood transfusions. And this is a truly tragic part of it. A nurse's note reveals that she was passing blood clots, quote, the size of grapefruit. So Hope called his mother, who was herself a former physician, who told him she needed a DNC, one of the surgical procedures for ending a pregnancy. Doctors who received medical notes also told ProPublica doing this reporting that since she was clearly hemorrhaging, the DNC was the only way to vacuum all remaining fetal tissue from her uterus and stop the bleeding. So hours and hours pass. She eventually is given medication, but according to experts that ProPublica spoke with, that was unsafe to give her when bleeding heavily, and she did in fact need the DNC instead. But according to Texas doctors, those are considered more legally risky given the legal changes that happen in the wake of the end of Roe v. Wade. And so they are very worried about doing that because the doctors themselves could suffer severe legal ramifications. They could end up massively fined or losing their careers or perhaps ending up in prison. And so they don't want to do it, even though that is in the best interest of the patient. And so as the night progressed, she complained of chest pain and said she didn't feel right. Nurse notes indicate her vitals looked fine, but medical experts told ProPublica that when healthy pregnant patients are hemorrhaging, they can appear stable until they crash, at which point they could deteriorate too quickly for hospitals to save their lives. This is, in this case, what appeared to have happened, and she died nearly 10 hours after arriving at the emergency room. And so, as I said, there are through lines to these stories. There are situations where these women are not they're not generally looking for abortions. They generally have children. They might be interested in having this child, but it's simply not going to happen. And the miscarriage or the side effects of the pregnancy are an actual risk to their health and life. And that is what these exceptions to the law are always supposed to provide it out for. But again, we're just adding more and more case studies showing that's not how it actually works. And that's not how the law is written. It's PR to say that there are exceptions. It's to make it a little bit more palatable for the masses. It's not to save your life because they don't save people's lives in these situations, Adrienne.
No, you're absolutely right. And Texas, by virtue of its laws, has created an incredible conflict of interest for these doctors who can't sustain having to potentially lose their licenses or even have to litigate matters just because they choose to put their patients' health first. And that should be their job and that should be their only focus. But unfortunately, that has been stripped of them. And now they only feel that they can proceed in doing the work when they're not necessarily going to be prosecuted for it. This is so incredibly unnecessary, and it's incredibly detrimental to the lives of women there in Texas. And this is just another example of that. It's unnecessary, and it's disturbing that they're allowing this to continue to happen.
Yeah, and they see it. I mean, these stories, I don't know if all 5 of them have, but a number of them have become big nationwide news. During the election, some of them were the part of the focus of the Harris campaign. People are aware that this is happening, and not just in Texas. We've seen it in other states, and people are, they're twiddling their thumbs. just not interested in changing it. And by the way, it isn't just these case studies. The actual data just shows the negative impact of these laws. In Texas, maternal mortality jumped 56% after its abortion ban took effect. And by the way, that's worse than the rest of the country. The rest of the country saw an 11% increase. And I would personally say, it's not like America was killing it with our maternal mortality rate before the death of Roe v. Wade. We already were barbaric and uncaring when it came to that, but we somehow found a way over the last few years to make it worse. And in Texas in particular, that's a staggering increase. And one would think that if you pass a law with the goal of being pro-life and it's clearly killing mothers at insane rates, maybe roll back the law, but that's not even a conversation that's being had. It's not like, they're figuring out some reforms or anything. There is no discussion. They are not talking about changing this. We see this as a unique horror. They see, first of all, they don't even really see it because they don't care to see it. They're certainly not focusing on it. But to the extent that they would, what are you gonna do? We gotta stop abortion. You can't make, a Christian fascist state without breaking some moms, I suppose. And so look, what needs to happen is federal intervention. We need a law, we need a change in the composition of the Supreme Court. States are not going to act right just because they're slaughtering women. That's just not a big enough incentive for them, Adrienne.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not. And the thought that there were so many women who voted for Donald Trump, it really shows you how much women even hate women. People don't care whether we live or die. And that continues to show and track in the leaders that we put in positions of leadership. And it is completely and totally conflicting, this thought that this pro-life group who also is pushing individuals to continue to procreate is setting up circumstances and conditions such that women cannot procreate, but they die. It's completely and totally idiotic. It makes no sense whatsoever, yet these are the policies that they continue to employ because control is king.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll throw out, look, even in these 5 cases that we have talked about that ProPublica and others have reported on, they're not all women of color, but they are disproportionately women of color. And I hope that that's not lost on people. And of course, even prior to the death of Roe v. Wade, maternal mortality rates broken down by racial demographics were already wildly biased and unequal. And so again, they found a way when it was already a horrible situation in so many states, particularly in the South, but not exclusively in the South. They found a way to make it even worse for all women, but in particular for women of color. And so, and also in terms of the politics of it, hey, what do you know? Texas doesn't care, that black women are dying at higher rates. Weird. I was waiting to find out what their view of that would be.